So could you please confirm whether you are able to see my screen or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I think we can get started now. So if you recall, we were discussing about this 802.15.4, right? And we looked at some of its properties and the different layers, the physical and the MAC layers, and how they basically map with the OSI layers. I think you remember all of these. And then let us continue further and try to have a look at some of the different other aspects of IEEE 802.15.4. This is a very important standard, as I told you earlier as well. The reason being that it forms the basis for a lot of personal area networking that is required for for IoT, right? So right now we are talking about the communication technologies that involve the development of IoT based systems. But ultimately, remember all of this, that whatever we are discussing, we are talking about the collection of data, right? So what is important is that how you are going to process the data, where you are going to store it, and so on and so forth. So that is where basically the cloud integration comes into picture, and the usefulness of cloud in that context becomes evident. Why cloud is required, why it is important to be integrated with IoT networks, right? So this is where this thing becomes evident. So let us try to, for the sake of completeness, let us try to understand a few more of these concepts that are involved in 802.15.4, and a few other associated technologies we are going to cover for the sake of completeness, and then you can have some holistic idea about what constitutes the networking and communication for building IoT based systems. So once we do that, again we will be switching back our gear to core cloud, whatever we have discussed, and there are a few other aspects that are remaining. We have very little time left with us, and so we will be utilizing this time properly to do the the rest of the remaining stuff for cloud computing, right? So we are going to go through them one by one, and so we have only roughly about 2 weeks remaining, so we have to plan our time judiciously. So anyway, let us quickly try to go through the rest of the materials that I have for you. 802.15.4 standard, it is followed by a lot of different large number of different types of devices, right? And so wherever you are talking about IoT, by development of IoT using this particular standard 802.15.4, there are two classes of devices that you need to know as per the specification in the specification of 802.15.4 standard. So as per the standard, there are two types of devices that are specified. Number one is the full functional device, FFD, and the other one is called the reduced functional device, RFD. Full functional device and reduced functional device. So as these names suggest, the full functional device can communicate with all types of devices, fully functional, right? So all types of devices, these devices can communicate with. And if you are talking about reduced functional device, so these can only communicate with full functional device. So the advantage is that in reduced functional device, you have reduced consumption of memory, RAM, power, etc., right? Whereas in full functional device, because everything is functional, there is more consumption of all of these parameters that I just mentioned. So reduced functional device will be used to minimize, by trading off the functionalities, to minimize the resource consumption, whereas in full functional device you cannot minimize any of these, so the device becomes fully functional with respect to all of these different types of parameters, and these become, they become hungry with respect to power consumption, memory usage, etc. So examples of fully functional device are PAN coordinator, personal area network. So I told you that 802.15.4 can help you set up wireless personal area network, right? So there is a coordinator device that is required in every PAN, right? So this PAN coordinator is an example of a fully functional device. Routers are examples of fully functional device, whereas regular devices can either be configured to serve as a fully functional device or as reduced functional device. Okay, so this is basically the overall classification of the types of devices that exist in the IEEE 802.15.4. So 802.15.4 talks about not only the physical layer but also the MAC layer, right? So if you look at the frames, the PDUs, so there are different types of frames that are basically supported in 802.15.4. So these are this is basically the list of all these different types of frames. So I'm not going through each of them individually, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to, right? So these are quite obvious. I'm just touching upon this thing, but what I would urge you to do is to open up the draft specification and have a look through all of these and try to understand, so what is the functionality of each of these different types of frames. So when you talk about these networks in 802.15.4, these networks again can be classified into two types. One is called the beacon enabled networks. The other one is called the non-beacon enabled networks. So again, beacon means what? Short messages. So in beacon enabled networks, basically short beacon messages are transmitted periodically. And the MAC protocol that is followed is the slotted CSMA-CA. So I assume that most of you have some basic background of networks, and what is CSMA-CA, what is slotted CSMA-CA. There are also, this is an assumption that I am making, that you already know about it. In case any of you who never took a course in networks before, after this class, maybe you can brush up, you can basically enrich your knowledge by quickly checking what these protocols are, right? So I'm not going to go through them in detail. It is not within the, we will not find time if we get into the depth of each of these. But you have to understand that there are certain protocols for medium access, and the slotted CSMA-CA is basically one such protocol. So these frames, the data frames, are transmitted through the slotted CSMA-CA in the case of beacon enabled networks. And these beacons basically are used to synchronize and associate the nodes with the coordinator node, right? So non-beacon enabled networks, here basically the frames are transmitted through unslotted CSMA-CA. So the previous one is slotted CSMA-CA protocol, and here it is the unslotted CSMA-CA, which uses this non-beacon. I mean, basically, so not non-beacon. I mean, basically there is no beacon, right? There is no beacon, right? So this unslotted CSMA-CA basically, uses a mechanism by which the data frames are transmitted using a contention-based approach, right? So these beacons are used for only link layer discovery in this case, and in other cases, basically, only for discovery. Whenever you have the link layer discovery, that means that you have to discover the links whenever there is a disconnection or the connection is not there. So for this, basically, you depend on the beacon transmittal. Other times, basically, there is no concept of transmission of beacons. So everything, all the stations who want to communicate, they will have to contend for getting access to the medium, that is the unslotted CSMA-CA. So here basically both the source and the destination IDs are required, and all protocol addressing must stick to the mesh configuration, as IEEE 802.15.4 is primarily a mesh-based protocol. So remember these things. So what it means is basically, many different types of topologies are possible, but in 802.15.4, the mesh protocol is the most popularly used one. So that is the 802.15.4. 802.15.4 is basically used as a standard for different communication protocols and and other technologies. So we'll not go through each of them in detail. So just a couple of things that I wanted to highlight at this point is something called the 6LoWPAN. Okay, LoWPAN is basically for low power wireless personal area network setup, and 6LoWPAN basically has a support for addressing which is based on IPv6. So that 6 basically comes from IPv6. So that is what 6LoWPAN is all about. So it is designed for low power devices by adopting a compressed IPv6 protocol to minimize the resource consumption. 6LoWPAN basically allows small low power devices with limited processing capability to communicate wirelessly through an internet protocol. So this 6LoWPAN basically is created and supported through two IETF drafts, IETF RFCs. One is the 5933 and the other one is the 4919. These are basically, if you want to get further details about the specification of 6LoWPAN, basically these are the two documents to look into. So some of the properties listed over here of 6LoWPAN: small packet size with low bandwidth and low power. Addressing is 64-bit extended, and for address for short addressing it is 16-bit. For extended addressing it is 64-bit, and for short addressing it is 16-bit. And 6LoWPAN, in addition to the mesh topology, it also supports the star topology, and it is of relatively low cost. So basically, all the 6LoWPAN supporting devices are also consequently of low cost. Cost means here it is the monetary cost, right? So this is basically the packet format which I have dumped onto this slide for you to go through. And I guess that if you have taken any course in networks before, you know how to interpret these packets, right? So in case you do not get in touch with me offline, I will guide you on this. So basically, as you can see, this is basically the packet format of 6LoWPAN, right? So it has the source address, destination address, and few other different fields, right? And so these are like this thing. So so this is basically the 6LoWPAN packet format. One thing is that because it is it involves the IPv6 addressing and also the 802.15.4 standard. So that's why basically you have on the very bottom IPv6 and this thing. এখন হবে না, বলো যে পরে আসতে। ওকে, আচ্ছা। So yeah, so these are basically the header types, so I'm for the sake, because here actually we have to focus more on the cloud. So I'm skipping these things, but these are basically the header types and the header fields that are there. So each of them, it is easy to go through. So I have listed everything over here. So once you get access to the slides, please go through them yourself. Now let me talk about something little conceptual, which is the routing part. So this is what you see over here is how 6LoWPAN routing takes place, right? So you have these 6LoWPAN networks. Each of these are connected to the internet. So within each of these networks, you have this personal area network, right? So these are basically 6LoWPAN personal area network. So these personal area networks are mesh connected. So they follow a mesh topology. And then so basically so this is basically personal area network, and basically each of these personal area networks are IP connected. So that means that these are going to be connected to the internet, and if they have to talk to each other, it will be via the internet. So there are many different protocols which support routing in 6LoWPAN. One is the LoadNG protocol, which is quite popular. Another one is also very popular, which is the RPL protocol, right? and then there is the high-low protocol. So the first two are quite popular in this particular domain. So this load NG routing, it basically is a simplified form of another routing protocol which is used in ad hoc networks, which is called the ad hoc on-demand distance vector routing, and it has been adopted and it has been modified suitably for use in IoT networks. So an ad hoc network routing protocol, AODV protocol, has been extended and suitably modified to be used in IoT. Right, so you don't have to really, because I'm not covering this ad hoc on-demand distance vector routing protocol, it is not possible to cover this in this short duration of time. But and again, unless you want to, you also don't have to go through it in detail, but just for your information that it is an ad hoc network routing protocol, right? So again, the question is that what is an ad hoc network? I do not know. I was just assuming that all of you know what is an ad hoc network. So ad hoc network is basically a network where there is no fixed infrastructure, right? So these are called infrastructure-less networks. So infrastructure-less means what? That you do not have any fixed designated wireless access point. You do not have a cell phone base station, fixed infrastructure like this. So you do not have any of these. So whenever you have a couple of devices which have to form an ad hoc network, they can be configured in such a way that they can start communicating with one another in the ad hoc mode without actually requiring any centralized access point or base station, right? So this is basically what an ad hoc network does. What is the advantage of an ad hoc network? Basically, you can set up a network pretty fast. If unless if you need if you need any kind of communication and existing infrastructure is not there, you can set up the network in those cases also. So basically in battlefields, for example, or in remote areas where there is no existing communication or connectivity existing, you can set up these ad hoc networks pretty fast, right? And these can be very useful. So this load NG basically routing protocol, it supports different operations. The first one is the RREQ. So RREQ is basically route request, right? So the route requests are generated by the originator to discover a route to a destination. Then forwarding of the RREQs until they reach the destination router, and the generation of route replies, RREPs, after receiving the RREQ from the destination to the originator. That means that whenever this RREQ request is received by a destination device, the destination device basically responds that receipt with the help of this RREP, the route reply message against the route request message that was received. Okay. So if a route is broken, then another message that is used is called the route error. So RERR message. And if there is any device which discovers any kind of an error, so basically this message is going to be propagated back to whom? To the originator, right? That means the source device which had initially sent the route request packet. So so route request packet basically is originated from the originator node, the source node. It travels through the intermediate nodes, intermediate hops. Anywhere there is an error, so route error message is sent back. Okay, and that way the source node will come to know that there is basically a route breakage that is there somewhere in between in one of the intermediate nodes in the entire path. So optimized flooding is supported to reduce the overhead created by RREQ generation and flooding, and only the destination is authorized to respond to the RREQ. Okay, so these are some of these different features of this load NG routing protocol. Similarly, there is this RPL protocol, which is for networks which are lossy networks. Lossy means that a lot of packets get dropped, right? So RPL protocol was designed to be used in lossy networks and low power networks. Low power, so we are dealing with all low power networks only. 802.15.4 based all networks are basically low power networks. So we are dealing with low power networks, but here actually the benefit of RPL routing is more evident when we are using it for routing in the case of lossy networks. So in the case of lossy networks, this particular protocol handles the routing topology, thereby employing low rate beaconing. Okay, so beacon messages are going to be sent, but at very low rate, right? So infrequently these are going to be sent. Okay, so like this, actually there are a few other properties also. For example, there is the proactive mode for maintaining the routing topology, and then there is a reactive mode for resolving the routing inconsistencies. Okay, so these are some of these different important properties of RPL routing. Okay, next I'm going to touch upon another technology which is very much used for IoT, which is called the RFID. RFID is something that I think 100% of you are already familiar with. I'm sure that all of you have seen RFID tags, right? Whenever you are going to the shopping malls or many other places, actually RFID tags are used. Even in many highways, right, for collecting toll, etc. So RFID tags are often used to give regular access to drivers who have to cross a certain stretch of road frequently, like several times a week or something like that. So RFIDs are very useful, but RFIDs basically work with the principle of something called magnetic induction, right? RFID and its counterpart, which is also another technology, which is also called which is known as the NFC and RFID. NFC is for near field communication. Okay, NFC. So NFC and RFID both basically use the principle of magnetic induction to communicate. So radio frequency identification is basically the full form of RFID, and here basically there is a radio transponder, a radio receiver, and a radio transmitter. Okay, so this is basically the three components of any RFID system. So it is very similar to the barcoding mechanism, and here basically the digitally encoded data in the RFID tags, it can be read by the reader. What is this reader? So RFID basically has two parts. One is called the RFID reader, the other one is called the RFID tag. So all the data basically are stored in certain form in these RFID tags, and the reader basically is the one which, when brought in close proximity to the RFID tag, the data through magnetic induction are going to be transferred between the tag and the reader. Okay, so the reader then can read from the tags when it is brought sufficiently close to the tag, and the data are stored somewhere in the form of maybe in a database locally or in the cloud or something like that. So unlike the barcodes and QR codes, RFID tag data can be read outside the line of sight. So they don't have to be line of sight with each other. RFID can work even when let us say that there is some let us say some kind of obstruction in between, right? So even if there is an obstruction, because it works with the principle of magnetic induction, so that's why you don't have to keep them within the close line of sight of each other. Just close proximity will be fine. Each RFID tag basically comprises an integrated circuit and an antenna, and these RFID tags are often covered with protective material to act as a shield between various environmental effects. These tags can be passive or active. The passive tags are more widely used, and these are powered by the RFID readers interrogating radio waves before they transmit the information. And the active tags, on the other hand, have their own power supply, and therefore the reader can read them from hundreds of meters apart. So passive tags, you have to bring them sufficiently close to the reader. The reader and the tags will have to be brought sufficiently close to each other, whereas the active tags basically can be a little away, and still they are going to work because they have their own power supply to power them. So RFID types: passive reader active tag PRAT, active reader passive tag ARPT, and active reader active tag ARAT. PRAT, ARPT, and ARAT. So again, I'm not going to go through them in detail. These are pretty understandable. So RFID basically works very similar to barcodes, QR codes, etc. So I urge you to go through these materials, and the source I have also given in every slide. I have given you wherever relevant the source from where I have taken stuff, right? So for preparing this slide. So if you are interested, please go through these sources that are mentioned. Not only interested, actually I urge you to go through these sources, because you will get a lot more information beyond what I am covering in a very summarized manner, right? How the RFID tags work. So as you can see over here, this is basically this RFID tag, which has its own cover. Typically, you must have seen the RFID tags which are like rectangular shaped. Then you have some kind of a magnetic coil or something like that inside, which is not typically visible, but outside actually what you see is kind of a plastic casing, right? And on the other side, you have the other pair, which is called the reader, right? So contactless RFID reader. So tag and reader, they can be brought in close proximity to each other, and consequently what will happen is there will be some kind of a magnetic induction, so magnetic lines of force will be created, and the data will be transferred between the tag and the reader. Okay, and where do you place the tag? You place the tag wherever whatever you want to track, you want to monitor, and so on. So basically, if you are talking about, let us say, a grocery store, or maybe a cloth store or something like that, you must have noticed that in shopping malls many times, many of these clothes, they have their own RFID tags, right? So if you bring the RFID reader close to the tag, you can get all the data like price, since when it is in the shelf, and so on, right? So those basically are this these are encoded within the tag, and the data are basically captured from these tags. So these are some of these different applications of RFID tags, RFIDs. So inventory management, asset tracking, controlling access to restricted areas, locating lost airport baggage, timing sporting events, supply chain management, counterfeit prevention, tracking of persons and animals. So this basically reminds me about something, tracking of persons and animals. There are two things that I get reminded. One is that long back in IIT Delhi, I remember IIT Delhi, one of the professors, one of my colleagues, one of my friends, he was executing a project in the wildlife, on the wildlife, right? So what he did is so all the endangered species, he had a project where they are going to be RFID tagged, each of these different, these animals, which will have to be tracked. They are tagged with RFID, and whenever they are moving, wherever, so you can get access to the data through these different tags, right? So this is one thing that I remember, tracking using RFID, tracking of animals. And another one was tracking of persons. I remember in IIT Kharagpur, one of my colleagues, again, from our department only, he developed a system where the persons, the students, the school children, so the school children, they are going to be carrying the RFID tags with them, and so that their movement, their tracking, all of these things can be done remotely, even by their parents, right? So all of these, basically, you can understand that these devices, they are going to generate a lot of data, whether it is coming from regular sensor devices or from RFIDs. Basically, a lot of data continuously are going to be generated. So how and where you are going to store the data, how you are going to process the data, that is the most interesting part of developing applications using these technologies. So it will be something that I will skip for now. Okay, so but it is also based on IEEE 802.15.4. Any question? Okay, so I think so for the so I have to make sure that I don't cover too much, so that you cannot digest. So I will skip it, and I will leave you over here only. Okay, So a couple of things that I wanted to announce. Day after tomorrow we are going to have again the review of the project progress. This is very important, and so please, all of you, those of you who got minus marks due to non-attendance in the last meeting, last week, basically, you please make sure that you not last week, last to last week, basically, you make sure that you remain present, because otherwise, unnecessarily you are losing marks, right? So please, all of you, please be present. Day after tomorrow we are going to do that. These so here actually I have 60 more slides to cover. Tomorrow I'll be covering most of them. That is not a problem. Tomorrow we'll be finishing this slide, and we will have day after tomorrow we'll be going through the project. We have to do some test and some quiz, right? So those are also remaining. So I will announce the dates beforehand, and some other materials also have to be covered. Like briefly, I'm going to also talk about cloud security, because cloud security is very important. So I'm planning to do a couple of lectures on cloud security, so that you can get some holistic idea about all the different types of aspects that are there in the domain of cloud. So cloud is the most security is the only thing that is primarily remaining right now. Rest of the other stuff which are important in cloud computing, so mostly I have covered. And please do the projects very well, because projects give you better learning, and you learn a lot of things which are even if you listen to me very carefully also, it is not going to be complete, right? So unless you do things yourself, you will never, your learning is not going to be for long term, and it is not going to be complete. So I urge you to not only think about the marks for your project, but also take it seriously. Only a few more days left, and if you take it seriously, you will be learning things which will be going to your permanent memory, and this can be very helpful to you in future. So remember that cloud computing is a very hot technology, as most of you already know. Another technology that is very hot is IoT, right? So Internet of Things. So there, I have another semester course, Internet of Things, which some of you like Sontu, etc., have already taken. So you can take it in the autumn semester. I have taught it actually 4 times, so I'm not sure whether I'm going to teach it once more. But if I do, or even if I don't, what I urge you to do is, you take that course, because it is going to be very useful. I have seen many students who take IoT courses, because these courses are very useful for them anyway. Coming back to cloud computing is very useful, not only for getting a job, but also for getting getting a lot of knowledge, because nowadays everything that you do, these are actually cloud based, right? So all cloud integrated projects, right? So that's why I urge you to basically um,